in Iran, which surround the election of its new president.
WION The Codes, Iran's race to power.
Hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching Gravitas with me, Molly Gambhir. We are coming to you live from the WION headquarters in Noida, India. Let's get started. Is a Gaza deal on the cards? What will post-war Gaza look like? On Gravitas tonight, we focus on these big questions. And while efforts are being made to try and push for peace in Gaza, the question is the war coming to Hezbollah? That's our top story tonight, coming up in just a bit. Here's a look at what else is lined up for you on the show. The US has passed a resolution seeking an independent probe into the Pakistan elections. How has Islamabad reacted? What's brewing? We get you the complete story. We tell you how the failed coup attempt in Bolivia unfolded and break down the developments for you. How harmful is ultra-processed food for your body? Does it need tobacco-style warnings? We tell you why this question is being raised. All this and more coming up tonight on Gravitas. Stay with us. When I say the day after plan, what does that make you think of? A movie? A book title? Because for diplomats and policymakers focusing on West Asia right now, it means only one thing. What happens the day after the fighting stops in Gaza? Even though truce in Gaza seems far off right now, there is growing attention on what should happen once the fighting ends in Gaza. So is a post-war Gaza deal likely? Is a plan for what Gaza will look like after the war finally taking shape? As the US leads efforts to discuss the issue, a rough blueprint for the road to Gaza's governance post-war has come to light. According to the Times of Israel, officials familiar with the matter have detailed what's happening behind doors. As per the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Egypt and the UAE are reportedly ready to join a post-war Gaza security force. According to unnamed officials mentioned in the Times of Israel, Blinken informed regional counterparts about this possibility during his recent visit to the region. You see, even though a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas remains elusive, the US is preparing to roll out its vision for the post-war management of Gaza. America has been looking to recruit its Arab allies for the initiative. It now seems like the US has the support of Cairo and Abu Dhabi. The current plan looks like this. Egypt and the UAE will be a part of a force that would work alongside local Palestinian officers. Now, the fact that everyone agrees on Gaza's post-war management is not surprising. After all, the Arab allies want peace and stability in their region. But you see, they're coming to an understanding with the US comes with certain conditions. Yes, Cairo and Abu Dhabi are on board, but conditionally. The two countries have stipulated the conditions for their involvement. Now here's the kicker. One of their demands includes that the initiative be linked to the establishment of a pathway to a future Palestinian state. And that is sure to irk the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as he has always vowed to block a future Palestinian state. Additionally, Egypt is demanding the complete withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza, a demand that clashes with Netanyahu's pledge to maintain overall security control of the Palestinian Strip after the war. Netanyahu, remember, also wants Israel to be able to re-enter Gaza as necessary in order to prevent the revival of Hamas. Now, just going back to what the post-war plan could or would look like for Gaza, Blinken told counterparts that the US would help establish and train the new security force. They would also ensure that this new force has a temporary mandate so that it could eventually be replaced by a fully Palestinian body. Ultimately, the goal is for the Palestinian Authority to eventually take over Gaza, reuniting the war-torn Palestinian Strip and the West Bank under a single governing entity. The hope is that this would pave the way eventually to a two-state solution. Now, for those of you wondering, will the US be contributing troops of its own? The answer is no. At least that's what the officials told the Times of Israel in anonymity. This is what we know about the post-war plan for Gaza. The US is actively developing 3 concept notes on various issues. It is anticipated that Saudi Arabia will play a leading role in the reconstruction efforts in Gaza. Regarding governance, Blinken has communicated privately that the aim is to establish a transitional government in Gaza, one that would closely collaborate with regional countries. Blinken has been engaged in the ongoing discussions for months with counterparts from Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Jordan, Egypt, and the Palestinian Authority. Furthermore, he has also enlisted the participation of Morocco, Bahrain, Turkey, Indonesia, and others to garner broad international support for the post-war stabilization of Gaza. In fact, Blinken has said that it is the Hamas that will determine whether or not the war will continue. And he has firmly stated that the armed Palestinian group cannot and will not be allowed to dictate the future of the region. Additionally, the US has also urged Israel to develop its own day-after plan. Netanyahu has continuously avoided discussing post-war management of Gaza, largely due to his reluctance to challenge his far-right coalition partners who advocate for the occupation of Gaza and the re-establishment of settlements there. National Unity Party chairman Benny Gantz, in fact, pointed to Netanyahu's avoidance of the issue as his reason for resigning from the wartime government. Similarly, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has openly criticized Netanyahu's handling of the matter, but it seems like the Americans are not taking any of this. The US has warned Israel that failure to come up with a post-war plan for Gaza will result in Israel either permanently occupying the Strip or ushering in a period of chaos where Hamas could regain control. Israel does not want that. Finally, regarding the timing of the plan for post-war Gaza being made public, Blinken's response was soon. He mentioned during a press conference in Doha early this month that in the coming weeks, proposals for key elements of the day after planning will be put forward, including concrete ideas for how to manage governance, security, as well as reconstruction of Gaza. And while they try to push for peace in Gaza, the war is coming to Hezbollah. After over nearly 9 months of parallel conflict with Hezbollah at the border, Israel's military has laid waste to thousands of acres of farmland in southern Lebanon. It has led to the displacement of hundreds of thousands of people and wrought heavy economic damage. While diplomats are scrambling to prevent a full-scale war between Israel and Hezbollah, data shows that attacks have ravaged a 5-kilometer-wide strip of land. Buildings have been damaged, farmland and forests are on fire, entire neighborhoods have been leveled. Most of the destruction has happened within a 5-kilometer corridor north of the Blue Line, which is a UN-drawn border between the two sides. The Israeli military has reportedly used force to create a new reality on the ground. Near daily aerial bombardment, artillery shelling, alleged use of incendiary chemical white phosphorus have made much of the strip of land uninhabitable. As per experts, the extent of the damage done has started to resemble a buffer zone, something that Israel wants to establish in Lebanon. Attempts to negotiate a deal that would include Hezbollah pull back from the border have reportedly failed. The area has become a de facto military zone patrolled by Hezbollah fighters as well as the Lebanese armed forces and UN peacekeepers. Only a handful of people remain. The UN says that more than 95,000 people have been forcibly displaced in Lebanon south amid the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah. Israeli strikes have reportedly killed more than 90 civilians and 300 Hezbollah fighters. What is the status of the diplomatic talks, you ask? They remain gridlocked. You see, Israel is demanding that the Iran-backed armed group pull its forces back from the border, including the elite Radwan unit. But Hezbollah says that it will not agree to a deal until there is a ceasefire in Gaza. Remember, Hezbollah says it attacks Israel to show solidarity with Hamas and Palestinians in Gaza. Ever since the Gaza war started, Hezbollah and Israel have exchanged fire at the border, and Hezbollah is still carrying out daily operations against Israeli targets. It is, in fact, showing no signs of abating. For Hezbollah, pulling back fighters from the border is virtually inconceivable. You see, the Iran-backed group is not only Lebanon's most powerful military and political force, it also controls the south, where it has been deeply embedded in communities for decades now. Moreover, given the sheer strength of its cadre, Hezbollah is also considered to be more powerful than Hamas in Gaza. In the recent weeks, fears have risen of a full-blown war between Hezbollah and Israel. It's because both sides have ramped up their war rhetoric. The armed group has issued drone footage of sites deep in Israel as potential targets. Meanwhile, Israel has assassinated high-ranking Hezbollah commanders said to be armed by Iran. Hezbollah has escalated its campaign in recent weeks, in fact, attacking Israel an average of 10 times a day. Israel has launched roughly 4 times as many attacks as Hezbollah. Earlier this month, Israel made its deepest attack yet into Lebanon, striking 75 miles north of the border. Looking at the signs on the ground, experts are sure it is part of a wider Israeli campaign aimed at creating a buffer zone.
Is anything better now than it was? I've been Prime Minister for 18 months. Mark my words, your taxes are going up. We will keep cutting taxes
anything that can go wrong will go wrong. We've heard of that. And UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak knows that is completely true. After all, everything seems to be going wrong for him. The mountain of trouble keeps getting taller while his popularity keeps plummeting. And with a week to go for the UK general election, things have not looked worse for him. The latest Ipsos political monitor asks the public who they will vote for at the upcoming general election, also their attitudes towards the parties and their leaders and policies on key issues. What has it found? No surprises here. People are grossly unhappy with the UK Prime Minister. You know how many were found to be satisfied with the job that Rishi Sunak is doing as the country's Prime Minister? 20%. 75% are dissatisfied, a whopping 75%. In fact, his net score of -55 is the worst for any Prime Minister tracked by Ipsos at this stage of an election campaign going back to 1979. So he's setting the wrong kind of records here. 67% dislike Sunak. This, in fact, has shot up from 49% a year ago, while 72% dislike the Conservative Party. And if this wasn't bad enough, Rishi Sunak's Conservatives find themselves caught in a major controversy just days before the election. What are we talking about? A betting scandal. You heard that right. And I know what you're probably thinking. Could things get any worse for Sunak? Probably not. 5 Conservative officials were named as being under investigation by the Gambling Commission for allegedly placing bets on a July election using inside party knowledge. The Gambling Commission, by the way, is the UK body responsible for regulating Britain's gambling laws. It is believed to be investigating as many as 15 Conservative Party candidates and officials for allegedly betting on the timing of the election. The scandal could not have come at a worse time or a more embarrassing time, and it is majorly hampering the Conservatives' efforts to close the gap on the opposition Labour Party's large poll lead just days before the election. Since the betting allegations first emerged, the conduct of the government has become the second most important issue for the voters behind the cost of living crisis, as per a poll. The betting scandal intensified further late on Tuesday after a cabinet minister said he had placed 3 bets on the date of the election, but that he was not being investigated by the gambling regulator. A Labour candidate also admitted placing a bet against himself. This is appalling, to say the least. And the thing is, all of this is a horrible mix for the Britons, for the people on the ground who want answers, who want a better life, who deserve a better life. Which way will things go from here? The countdown is already underway for the elections, and the clock is ticking for Rishi Sunak. Let's now shift our focus to Pakistan. Islamabad's economy is not the only thing in a mess. After being marred by persistent violence, nationwide internet shutdowns, mass arrests, widespread corruption, and unusually delayed results, its election process is now under the scanner. Pakistan seems to be in a total mess. But who is raising aspersions over its February 8 election, you ask? Well, the United States of America. You see, Karl Marx famously said, history repeats itself, first as a tragedy, second as a farce. And speaking of Pakistan's elections, the saying sits rather well. The February 8 elections will serve as a grim reminder that history can not only be a tragedy, but also a farce at the same time, perhaps. I'm not the one saying that. The US House of Representatives is questioning the elections and has passed a bipartisan bill to that end. The resolution was passed by an overwhelming 368-7 vote. Apart from calling on President Biden to tie up with Pakistan in upholding democracy, human rights and the rule of law, the resolution also urges Islamabad to uphold democratic and electoral institutions, human rights and the rule of law, and respect the fundamental guarantees of due process, freedom of press, freedom of assembly, freedom of speech. It condemns attempts to suppress the people of Pakistan's participation in their democracy, including through harassment, intimidation, violence, arbitrary detention, restrictions on access to the internet and telecommunications, or any violation of their human, civil, or political rights. It further condemns any effort to subvert the political, electoral, or judicial processes of Pakistan. And finally, the resolution demands the full and independent investigation of claims of interference or irregularities in the February polls. More importantly, the resolution takes Pakistan's military establishment head on, and as ironic as it may sound, the document reminds the government and the military officials of their constitutional oaths. It quotes from the Pakistani constitution: the federal government shall have control and command of the armed forces, while the armed forces swear they will uphold the constitution and not engage in any political activities. The ignominy does not stop there. The document underlines two important facts. First, allegations by credible international and local observers, the same observers, by the way, that Pakistan has advertised with a lot of fanfare. They have alleged interference in the electoral process, including electoral violence, intimidation, arrest of political actors, restrictions to freedom of assembly, restrictions on freedom of expression, and restrictions on access to the internet and telecommunications. The February 9, in fact, the U.S. Department of State assessment of observers, it included undue restrictions on freedom of expression, association and peaceful assembly, condemned electoral violence, as well as restrictions on the exercise of human rights and fundamental freedoms, and called for the full investigation of fraud or interference in Pakistan's general elections. Unsurprisingly, Islamabad has said the resolution does not align well with the positive dynamics of its bilateral ties with Washington. Now, these statements might come as a surprise to you. However, that may not be the case with the Pakistani establishment. The country has held 12 general elections so far, and almost all of them have been marred by similar allegations. The condition is so dire that some of these have their own distinct names. The controlled elections of 1997, the party-less polls of 1985, the general's election of 2002, the mother of all rigging in 1990, 2018's, quote, the most unfair elections but only till date, unquote. And surprisingly, many are of the opinion that the 2024 elections have surpassed the 2018 so-called most unfair elections. The reason behind Pakistan's diplomatic collapse, in a way, is not complex. The country's civil-military relations still tilt in favor of the army. Politicians are incentivized and forced, in many cases, to side with the generals to attain power. And this dynamic has weakened the constitution. It has compromised the judiciary and totally undermined the democratic elections. In a way, Pakistan's military no longer intervenes in politics via coups. Its leaders are now invested in the political system. The country transformed into an uncertain and dangerous hybrid regime as elements of electoral democracy and military influence mingle. And the U.S. resolution stands testament to the fact that February's elections have only marked the next chapter of tragedy and farce. The Baltic Sea is a strategically sensitive region. The Baltic Sea is now surrounded by NATO countries, thereby raising concern for Russia. In a show of might, both sides have been conducting military exercises. Russia's naval fleet also performed drills that included simulated attacks against NATO targets. How do Russia and NATO fare? Let's find out. The Baltic Sea is a region that houses crucial infrastructure. There is everything from gas pipelines to wind farms, undersea communication cables. Today, the Baltic Sea is widely regarded as a NATO lake. Owing to the geopolitical developments over the last few decades, more countries have aligned themselves with the NATO. The Russia-Ukraine war only accelerated this. At present, 8 of the 9 countries along the Baltic Sea are NATO members. The 9th country is Russia. And with so many NATO nations with adjoining territories, there are multiple advantages for the NATO bloc. Easy troop movement via land, easier control over the Baltic Sea, and much more. The Baltic region, in fact, is crucial for both Russia and the other countries. For Russia, the Baltic region ports like St. Petersburg and Primorsk are hubs for export of oil and import of essential commodities, including food. If not for the Baltic region ports, cargo to or from Russia would have to travel significantly longer routes. It's not just trade and commercial interests, by the way. Russia's military interests are also tied to the Baltic. Russia's Kaliningrad is a location that is sandwiched between NATO and European Union member states Lithuania and Poland. Russia's Baltic fleet is stationed at Kaliningrad. So are Russian nuclear weapons. Kaliningrad is Russia's only ice-free port that permits year-round operations in the Baltic. This month alone, there have been both NATO and Russian military drills in the Baltic Sea. The 21-day NATO exercise, Baltops, saw the participation of 20 countries. In terms of the deployment, there were more than 50 ships, 85 aircraft, approximately 9,000 personnel. Baltops drills have been conducted on a yearly basis for more than 50 years, in fact, and this year's have been the largest and most high-octane. They included sea mine sweeps, submarine detection, landing of troops on coastal territories, and responses to mass casualties. With threats mounting in the vicinity of their Baltic fleet, Russia also has stepped up. Russia's exercises included missile firings, torpedo launches, undersea warfare, GPS jamming, electronic warfare. The Russian military has conducted 2 drills this month alone. In recent times, Russia has learned some lessons the hard way. Despite not having a full-fledged navy, Ukraine's strikes against Russian warships in the Black Sea have been a rude shock. Ukraine has used everything from cruise missiles to unmanned explosive-carrying vessels and mines to challenge Russia. However, Russia is not backing down. Top Russian military leaders have mentioned plans to build a massive aircraft carrier, one that displaces around 90,000 tons and is propelled by nuclear power. Now, in theory, Russia wants to build aircraft carriers that are similar to the American ones. America operates a fleet of 11 aircraft carriers, all of which are nuclear powered. Russia also hopes to operate a proposed maritime variant of the Sukhoi 57 stealth fighter from their planned aircraft carrier. However, aircraft carriers take at least a decade to build, test, weaponize, and get battle ready. Russia's only aircraft carrier, Kuznetsov, has not had a great run over the last 4 decades. For the last 7 years, it has remained out of operation and has been undergoing refits. Even now, there is not much clarity on when it would be back in service. For our next story, I want to begin by asking you, what is your go-to comfort food? Many would probably say junk food, like packaged noodles, burgers, chips, with a side of Coke or any soft drink perhaps. But did you know that these foods are as harmful to your health as smoking a cigarette? Well, ultra-processed foods are just as dangerous. According to nutritional scientist Professor Carlos Monteiro of the University of Sao Paulo, these foods should be heavily taxed due to their impact on health and mortality. Professor Monteiro, who first coined the term ultra-processed foods, says that these foods are displacing healthy diets all over the world. People seem to ignore the growing evidence of the risks associated with these types of food. And he suggests that they should be sold with tobacco-style warnings. Tobacco-style warnings. But what exactly are ultra-processed foods, you ask? Now, we know what unprocessed and processed foods are, but what classifies as ultra-processed? Ultra-processed foods have been linked to concerning health risks. They are heavily processed, often containing a long list of ingredients like added sugars, unhealthy fats, artificial colors, preservatives. Examples of ultra-processed foods include frozen meals, sugary drinks, packaged snacks, and many fast food items. Some ultra-processed foods that we consume daily without realizing include sugary cereals, instant oatmeal packets, breakfast pastries, pre-made breakfast sandwiches, potato chips, cookies, candy bars, energy bars, instant noodles. Additionally, sugary sodas, carbonated drinks, artificially flavored juices, fruit-flavored yogurt are also considered to be ultra-processed. And the list does not end there, by the way. What we're about to tell you next may even break your heart. Ice cream is also categorized as ultra-processed food. Studies, in fact, have shown that ultra-processed foods have a negative impact on both our physical and our mental well-being. They are convenient, often shelf-stable items, but they potentially increase the risk of a variety of health problems. In the UK and the US, more than half the average diet now consists of ultra-processed food. For some, especially people who are poorer or from disadvantaged areas, a diet consisting of 80% ultra-processed food is typical. In February this year, the world's largest review of its kind found that ultra-processed food were directly linked to 32 harmful effects to health. 32 harmful effects, including a higher risk of heart disease, cancer, type 2 diabetes, adverse mental health and early death. Professor Monteiro and his colleagues first used the phrase ultra-processed food some 15 years ago. He and his team were designing the food classification system NOVA. This basically assesses not only the nutritional content, but also the processed food undergoes, the processes that the food undergoes before it is consumed. Speaking to a British media outlet, Professor Monteiro expressed concern about the impact that ultra-processed food was having on human health. He stated that studies and reviews were no longer sufficient to warn the public of the health hazards. He has raised the alarm that health campaigns are required, similar to those against tobacco, to curb the dangers of ultra-processed food. He stressed how bad such food items are to one's health. Furthermore, he suggested that even advertisements for ultra-processed food should be banned or heavily restricted. Here on Gravitas, we have been telling you about how robots and artificial intelligence are here to take your jobs. Well, today we have another example, unfortunately. While countries around the world are facing a shortage of workers, Japan stands out. With its aging population and declining birth rate, the country is facing a big crisis. Where is the working class? The country is running out of people on the sidelines of the job market. But instead of searching for an end to this tunnel, Japan is rather building one. It is building a 310-mile automated conveyor belt system called the Auto Flow Road. It will connect Tokyo and Osaka, with Japan's delivery driver workforce expected to drop from 660,000 in 2020 to 480,000 by 2030. This project will replace the work of 25,000 drivers daily. By operating alongside existing roads and purpose-built tunnels, the Auto Flow Road will reduce congestion and pollution, enhancing efficiency and sustainability in freight transport. This massive project will see a 310-mile conveyor belt system built between Tokyo and Osaka. The conveyor belt will run continuously, utilizing tunnels, existing roads, and dedicated tracks. The Autoflow road is expected to transport the same amount of freight as human drivers, significantly reducing the reliance on truck drivers and easing congestion on the roadways. The project is still in the planning stages and has many hurdles. For one, the construction cost is expected to be substantial. Additionally, integrating the large-scale infrastructure project with the existing transportation networks will be a complex task. The Autoflow road project is a direct response to Japan's 2024 problem, where a shrinking workforce and new labor rules capping driver overtime threaten to paralyze the logistics sector. The automated conveyor belt system is designed to alleviate the pressure of the country needing to transport 1.4 billion tons of cargo annually by 2030. The Autoflow road is not confined to Japan. Switzerland is also developing underground freight tunnel networks, by the way. These networks are expected to lead to environmental improvement by reducing reliance on traditional delivery trucks that contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. Beyond Japan, other countries are also facing acute workforce shortages. And this is seen as a barrier to global growth, with major economies predicted to grow slower in the future. Germany's growth, for example, has been slashed from the average 2% to 0.7%, mainly due to labor shortage. With tighter credit conditions and looming inflation threat, unemployment is projected to rise exponentially. Though job vacancies are still robust, a potential skills mismatch is adding to the gloomy outlook for the workers. Canada's manufacturing sector is struggling to fill roles. Australia and Singapore also facing similar challenges. The US is undergoing a workforce reshuffle triggered by excessive hiring during COVID. Meanwhile, India has facilitated agreements with countries like Israel, Greece, and Italy to provide skilled and semi-skilled labor to boost the job market. Beyond excessive hiring during COVID-19, wage stagnation is another factor to consider here. Even for countries with relatively higher wages, the high cost of living continues to hurt the workers' economy. Japan's latest automation gives us a sneak peek into the future of work, where automated processes will replace human beings. While this is efficient for businesses in addressing their labor shortages, it also presents another set of challenges for the workers. Can workers fight the double blow of automation and the rising costs? We will have to wait and watch. Shifting focus for now, Bolivia has just survived a failed coup attempt. Dramatic scenes unfurled in the country's capital as armored vehicles rammed the doors of the government palace in an apparent coup attempt against the president. However, the president stood firm. Our next report telling you more.